We have two fantastic speakers for you. First of all, in a moment, you're going to hear from Rob Kenyon. Rob is in your guides as the Chief Officer for Health Partnership at Leeds City Council, but perhaps more relevantly, he is also the Deputy Spokesperson for Digital Leadership from Solace. And Rob will be up first talking in a moment. After Rob, you'll hear from Peter Wells. I met Peter 18 months or so ago when he was leading the project from Labour, sorry, politics, shouldn't mention it, I know you're not allowed, of Labour's Digital Government Review, and he's now the engagement lead for the Open Addresses project. What we'll do for this is, as we've done in the previous, Rob and Peter will both talk, and then we'll take questions for both of them at the end, rather than taking questions individually and biting into the other person's time to talk. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Rob.
Great. Great, thank you. Thanks very much for the introduction, and thank you everybody for having me here today. So on the basis that most of you, well, I reckon about a third of you are going to know most of what I'm talking about today. A third is going to know a bit about it, and a third of you hopefully won't know much about what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start off with your punchline. The punchline, if you remember nothing else, clean the windows. So the approach to building and maintaining good multidisciplinary, multi-agency digital teams, I'm going to say to you, is clean the windows. And hopefully I'll say a bit more about what I mean about that towards the end of the presentation today. So why me? Well, my day job is joining up the health and social care system in Leeds. So I exist because things don't work very well, and there are people like me across the country trying to make health and social care economies work more effectively, orient them around what people need rather than what organisations have historically provided. And why do we need you? Well, I'll come back to say this a bit more later on, because I haven't got the same stats as the UK, but as I'm sure many of you know, about a fifth of all ICT-related occupations in the US are in the health and social care sector. And for some of and if you didn't know that beforehand, you'll understand why as I go through some of the presentation today. But what I'd like to try and do, and building on the presentation from NHS England earlier, is just try to put this in the context of place. So I am the Deputy Spokesperson for Solace for Digital Leadership, and I'm going to really try and focus on Leeds to start with, and then sort of widen it out to the Solace agenda in a moment. So I'm focusing on Leeds and the healthcare sector because that's what I know most about. So Leeds, we have a vision to be the best city in the UK for everything. And for those of you who live and work outside of London, you will know that you have to work really hard for investment and to drive forward ambitious programs that in London you can just sort of take for granted because the world comes to you. So outside of Leeds you have to work really, really hard. Outside of London you have to work really, really hard. So we have a really clear vision that we want to make Leeds a healthy and caring city for all ages. But we know that part of that is actually making sure that we've got an aspirant, thriving economy. You can't have one without the other. So we've got a really clear growth strategy for the city. We fare very well in terms of economic growth. We've got some leading sectors, including fintech, and one of the largest manufacturing bases outside of London as well. And for those of you who don't know, Leeds is the second largest local authority outside of London. We have a population around 800,000 as a city and about 2.3 million as a city region. And what we've been trying to do over the last 3 years is join up our aspirations about our economy and improving people's health and well-being. And what's the best thing you can do for people's health and well-being? Get them a job, or at least a decent job. So on the back of that, we've been working in partnership with all the sectors in the city to try to bring together those two key aspects. And just to give you a flavour of some of them, we know, apart from wanting to improve the outcomes for the people of Leeds in terms of health and well-being, we've also got a £650 million financial gap between the services that we know we need to provide over the next 4.5 years and the money that we know we're going to get coming in. So we've got huge amounts of work to do, and we know that just doing the same old stuff is not going to bridge that gap. So we need to work very creatively. So just going back to my day job, so there are 3 bits to my role. So one is to try and join up the buses and the trains, metaphorically speaking, for the health and social care industry. So just to give you a quick analogy there, my father-in-law lives in deepest, darkest Kent. There's a fantastic award-winning bus service that services the village where he lives, and an award-winning train service as well that connects to go into London, where he has to go very frequently. Sad thing is, of course, that in terms of his patient journey, the journey he needs to make, the bus arrives at the train station 2 minutes after the hourly train has just departed. So in terms of orienting things around what people need, it's awful. Now, the NHS and social care historically work in just the same way, and we need to turn that on its head. In terms of the cash, about 4 years ago, there was a change to the health and social care system, which many of you will know about, which the chief exec of the NHS at the time said was so big you could see it from outer space. And one of the implications of that was that, for example, in Leeds, we went from having 3 commissioners of £2 billion worth of expenditure to 9. So guess what? Things get a bit more complicated and fragmented, so we need to join that back up again in a way. So improving how we spend money, which for those of you who don't know, the biggest single influence of how we spend money next year compared to this year is really, well, what did I spend last year? So to actually make more intelligent decisions in the future and to make more intelligent service redesigns in the future, it of course all depends on having access to good quality information. Historically, we've counted beans and told stories of what's happened in the past. We need to radically move that over to being more intelligent so that we can redesign services for the future. But doing that means you've got to work out what the it is. So we're spending a lot of time in Leeds at the moment designing platforms to make sure that we've got a single version, or as near as we can towards a single version of the truth. So no matter whether you're the patient trying to look after their own healthcare conditions, whether you're the provider trying to redesign how the service looks, whether you're commissioner working out what services to provide in the future, we'll also be versing on the same version of the truth. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're concentrating on. And as many of you will know, one of our flagship projects has been to develop this thing called the Leeds Care Record, which, in simple terms, it means that at the moment there's about 90% of the practices in Leeds that are signed up, that have gone live with this. Everyone's signed up to it. So it means whether you're a practitioner sat in a GP surgery, a community healthcare provider, in the hospital, you can see a single version of the truth for the patient that you're seeing, and within the next couple of months that will be the same for adult social care, and later this year for children's services as well. And at the moment you can also see, if you're sat in a GP surgery, you can see which of your patients is in which ward, in which hospital, and therefore you can more proactively manage that patient's care. But I'm sure you know a lot of that sort of stuff already. A lot of that things is going on in other places as well. So why Leeds? Well, one of the reasons why I want to focus a bit on Leeds, apart from, of course, work there, is that many people are saying, including Knights of the Realm and former Chief Exec of the NHS, that nowhere else really has the potential that Leeds does to lead the world in terms of how we use health to drive so data to drive health and wellbeing outcomes. And there's a few good reasons for that. So by quirk of circumstance and other things as well, we have a number of very high profile companies based in the city working in this sector. A few of those are on the screen now. So the 2 largest providers of NHS software are there, TPP and EMIS. We've got the Health and Social Care Information Centre, as I'm sure you know, Leeds Data Mill, NHS England themselves are based in the city, as are some of the other NHS headquarters. And later this year, the £20 million Leeds Institute for Data Analytics will go live in the university. So there's a lot of stuff going on around the city already. And we want to really sort of make the most of that sort of natural cluster. But as all of you know, this requires people to deliver it. And at the moment, there's a lack of diversity in the sector. You know that there's a lack of digital skills around the country. It's a sector of high growth. There are loads of vacancies, and in the future, there's a potential of greater automation of the jobs that are currently taking place manually at the moment. As I'm sure you know, there's probably around 45,000 digital jobs being advertised in Britain at the moment. and that we also know that only 30% of that workforce are women, and that if we do something better in that field, if we try to encourage more women to take part in the field, we could generate an extra £2.6 billion of value a year in the sector. We know that the growth rate in this sector is going to be higher than anywhere else. And we also know that 20% of the population just lack the relevant digital skills. So what are we going to do about it? Well, as leaders, what local authorities and other public sector bodies should be doing is creating the conditions to enable the workforce to grow and develop. So local authorities are going to be smaller in size. Many of them have been cut by 30–40% over the last few years, but they need to be bigger in influence. And that's what the Commission on the Future of Local Government would say. We need to establish the correct communities so that people who work in the sort of companies that I was talking about on a previous slide feel like they're part of a real thing. So in Leeds, it's the Leeds data thing, and I know there are similar approaches in many other cities of the country as well. It's a community. People like living in communities. If you think about your own day-to-day lives, it's good to feel like you have a sense of belonging in the place, and that's what we need to create to help data communities thrive. We also need to get the branding right as well. So again, for example, in Leeds, we're going to be calling ourselves the Leeds Data City, and you'll know that the opportunities will come across from that sort of approach. That sort of the rhetoric around distance is death doesn't really seem to be playing part in this sector at all. And the other thing we need to do as leaders is to encourage different sectors to come together, whether it's academic institutions, local governments, the private sector, they all need to, and citizens all need to come together to drive additional value out of the sector. So what else do we need to do? Well, we also need to understand people's motivations. Now, there are some people, like in any sector, who are just in it for the cash. And to be frank, there ain't an awful lot that we're going to be able to do about that in the public sector, because that is quite difficult, as many of you know, to do anything innovative about that. And that's fine. So if people want to go for the money, that's just fine. We'll let them do that. There are also people who want to work, who will always want to work to do good public service. And then there are people in the middle. So my hypothesis here is that if we focus on that middle group where we can influence people's intrinsic motivations and support their motivations, we should be able to support the sector to develop more. So in 1966, England won the World Cup, and in Leeds we built this, Merrion House, which is a wonderful concrete state-of-the-art building at the time, and now looks like a concrete carbuncle. So I've just moved out of this building, as has about a couple of thousand public sector staff. What a fantastic place to work. Just been to visit a site in Bristol, many of you will know it, the Engine Shed. What a great space. Multi-professional, private sector, public sector, all working in a thriving atmosphere in a place designed especially to enable creative thinking. So it doesn't take a genius to decide where you'd rather work, but how many public sector buildings look like the first one rather than this one? So well done for Bristol for taking a punt. What else can we do? Well, we can build a lot of apprenticeships. We can work in partnerships with universities. Are we doing enough to challenge universities to put on the right number of undergraduate and postgraduate training places to grow the sector? Are we doing enough with our private sector colleagues in local places to offer shared learning opportunities? So, for instance, in Leeds, there's a company, one of our local tech companies is offering graduate traineeships, but is seconding people to work in our hospital because they know that there's going to be added value for them as a company if the people that they're training understand the sector more. So what are we doing to encourage those sort of things in the country? You'll know, of course, that we have a strong role as digital leaders to make sure that not only are we enabling people to be digitally proficient, but we also need, as leaders, to stop just saying that. There are still far too many chief execs and leaders of local authorities who don't embrace the digital revolution themselves, and therefore it's going to get increasingly difficult for them to suggest that we do more of that. So that's a real issue for us as Solid, and we're going to drive that forward. But we know that not only do we need to drive forward more workforce opportunities for digital professionals, but also for the digital workforce. So as we build greater and better platforms and enable more digital digitally enabled work to take place, we also have to focus on our generic workforce. And do our generic workforce actually have the skills to do this? And I would argue at the moment probably not. What else can we do? Well, we can also debunk the innovation myth. If we're really trying to say, well, how can more people stay in the public sector, we need to get across to people that actually the public sector is a great place to do work, a great place to innovate. And if you want to be involved in life-changing innovations, then the public sector can be a place to do that. I think all too often people think that the public sector is a place where innovation dies, but the things you've got on your screen there are things essentially that people invented in their spare time or directly in the public sector. So the roadmap, the iconic tube map, maglev, all of these things were developed by public sector people working in the UK. And as you probably know, although Apple have done all the fantastic work of bringing all the components together, most of the individual components in an iPhone were invented by people in the public sector. So if you really want to get involved in life-changing technology and design, public sector is a good place to be. So why are all those things important? Well, one of the reasons why they're fundamentally important, why we know they're absolutely critical to Leeds, is that a few months ago we did a snapshot of employment opportunities in the digital sector in Leeds, and we saw that there were £10 million worth of jobs advertised in just 1 month, in just one city. And what tends to happen is that the people who know what they're doing in the public sector work around a little bit to the, so generally speaking, it works at local authority, moves to the local NHS moves to national NHS, national NHS then moves to the private sector. And at the moment, so Sky, I think we're advertising, Sky Bet, we're advertising 300 jobs in Leeds a couple of months ago. So guess what happened? A load of our public sector lot went to work for them. So it's absolutely vital that we don't end up with a them and us. We need to do more stuff in partnership. But one thing we absolutely need to do is clean the windows. I went to work for the local authority, first of all, 7 years ago in that building I showed you earlier on. And at the time, I couldn't see out of the windows. And guess what? I've just left it, and I still can't see out of the windows. So it's just trying to be a metaphor for we need to get the workplace right. If we really want to get people to encourage them to live and work creatively in the public sector, forget the money, because we're never going to compete on that level. Get the other stuff right and create a good, warm, welcoming environment for people to work in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. And straight on to our next speaker, Peter Wells. Can you get through there, Brian? Yeah.
Excuse me one second. Cool. Hi, I'm Peter Wells. So, as Brian said, last year I worked on the Labour Party's, or an independent review commissioned by the Labour Party of Digital Government. It was 80,000 words long. There was a really good joke on page 60. Not many people made it that far, but it was a very, very good joke, worth it. What I've tried to say is not go into quite so much detail about policy wonkery. So I've just been a little bit silly, a little bit livelier. I'm picking up actually on some of the points Rob was making there towards the end. So the presentation is called Working Together for the Public Good. And I think this works somehow. Tech. I can never work tech. I've only worked in it for 25 years. Right, so public sector it's a great place to work. You can actually improve people's lives. There's people in the public sector teaching kids every day of the week. They're teaching people on their streets. They're improving people's lives. You're saving people's lives. The NHS, health, social care. Actually, good education can save someone's lives. We're saving people's lives in the public sector. We're making democracy work. right now, general election happening, lots of local elections happening. Democracy is very many and varied forms. That's a picture of a pub called the ballot box. Democracy happens in pubs. People talk to each other. They make local decisions. They talk about tree preservation orders, I imagine, as well as everything else we talk about in pubs. So we make democracy work in the public sector. That's fantastic. Great stuff. We keep the streets clean. It's really, really important. People forget about that. There's a little piece I remember, I was at an event a couple of months ago where we were talking about cleaning up dog shit. And someone goes, yeah, we have to do that all the time with this nasty bit of IT we had 20 years ago. No, it's literally local authorities, we have to clean the streets, make sure they're clean. It's really important. It makes our lives better. It makes that workplace better. It makes our journey to work better. So we do those things. The public sector is a great place to work. It improves our lives. Digital. I'm not going to use technology, but digital. Digital is great. This little piece there from a guy called Mark Andreessen saying software's eating the world. I wouldn't agree with many, many things that guy says. But he's saying the potential of digital to change everything across the world, the things we see happening right now. Digital improves people's lives. So that's a picture from, if anyone knows the Science Museum over in Kensington. They've got a marvellous exhibit at the moment called The Information Age, talking about the way digital and technology has evolved over the last couple of hundred years. I'd love to give guided tours of there. You can spot the origins of ADSL in a little piece of work from 1840. You can see someone doing some modulation in there, but it improves people's lives. It ends up with this exhibit there from, I think it's actually from Cameroon, of a mobile phone box that was built in there, and it's improved people's lives with mobile money and things like that. Digital improves people's lives. It does it all the time, all around the world. It can improve democracy. So here, a group called Democracy Club. Has anyone here heard of Democracy Club? 2, 3, 4. So Democracy Club, group of volunteers. They're using digital technologies, they're using crowdsourcing. They've gathered a list of candidates for every general election constituency and made it available. They made it so people can email those people, they can tweet them. They've got their CVs for about 20% of the candidates. They've gone out and collected CVs and made them apply. So they've improved democracy just using all these techniques we've heard about today, distributing it, using networks. And they do that because it's a great thing to do. They can actually search the goal, the polling station data. Lots of the councils around here, you'll have given them your polling station data. You might not realise you've done it, but you have. They're putting it onto maps so you can find their polling station. Regardless of whether they know which local authority they're in, they can just find it. It's great. It's marvellous. It can improve democracy in ways we may not have expected. This is milliband fandom, which is apparently happening on Twitter. I recommend not searching millifandom too long. It's a strange world. Okay? But it's improved democracy in a way. No one could have expected that to happen. It's engaging people in the election in democracy. If they're having debates, we wouldn't have expected it to happen. It's happening. Cool. It also has a picture of Ed Miliband with flowers around his head. So there's so much potential for digital to improve the public sector. Some of what we've heard about today is completely world-leading. It's world-leading technology, it's world-leading public services. Things like Verify, federated identity. No one else in the world has managed to make that happen. Some of the work we heard from NHS England on integrating health and social care. Again, no one's managing to make that happen. We're tackling those things. John over here with the Open Systems Alliance. Again, trying to rebuild local authorities using open source and collaboration and networks. It's really world-leading stuff. Top notch, you know. It's really good things. So digital can improve the public sector. Public sector is great, fantastic. So it must be a great place to work for digital people. There's so much energy. That's a picture from, it's not great, it's the best one I could find in my hunt through Flickr. That's Sprint 15, which if anyone knows about it, Sprints, they're the government digital services yearly events where they get together. I went along to their event this year at the BFI, British Film Institute, down on the South Bank. The energy in the room was astonishing, of people saying this is a great place to work in the public sector, in digital, in the public sector. It was fantastic. And then we have, it's in local government, it's the same. So both the work I was doing last year with Labour, for that independent review, working on this year, I go around local authorities. I talk to so many people who are enthusiastic and love what they're doing. I was down in Devon with Lucy Knight, actually, who spoke earlier. Again, the team down there, they're wonderfully infused. This picture's from a guy, Jamie White, up in Trafford, just outside Manchester. He's using NFC and the Internet of Things to measure his borough, to look at what's going on around it. There's actually some buoys floating in all the canals around Manchester measuring sewage. And they're so enthusiastic. Look what we could do. We could never have done before. We just couldn't have imagined doing these things. All that energy and all that potential. It's great. Potential to improve more things. That's me. That's open addresses. I had to get a little sales plug in. Very sorry. I'll stop from now. But again, we're going to try and improve address data. Use modern digital collaboration networks. Make it all better. Fantastic. Very happy. So it must be a great place to work. Now, during the review, so we actually did some research on these things because there was policy wonkery, as well as lots of pictures and memes and things. We also did some bit of research, a bit of thinking to get to 80,000 words. We did a survey with the help of Mortimer Spinks, recruitment agency, who did it as part of the Women in Technology Survey 2014, which is provided by Computer Weekly. They did 2,100 people or so responded to the survey. And we asked them, that's one of the questions, so they put some questions for us, said, are you aware of the work being undertaken in central government to transform to digital government? It's not great wording, but you know, I'm not a pollster, unfortunately. But I want to ask, who was aware? Were people aware of these things that are happening, all that energy that's happening in central local? I think it's 46% were aware of the work. That's good. Lots of energy there. So we're expecting that because we're wondering, all these people out there, they want to work. Whether they want to work in these things, it's really cool. We asked them, where would they work if they had the same remuneration but the choice of where to work? They wanted to work in the private sector. 83.4% wanted to work in the private sector, 47% in the public sector. We're like, oh, it's not great. We looked at that bit more detail, and we found, sorry for some of the suppliers in the room, that public sector via a private sector firm was even less preferred. So that's 41%. People were less likely to want to do that, even for the same remuneration, even with the fact they can improve people's lives. And they can do that, those things, all those great things they can do, even so they can clean our streets. They didn't want to do it. Okay. Where do they want to work? All this data, by the way, it's open data. I'll put these slides up on SlideShare and tweet them out and things, and Socitm can put it up there. The data itself for this is all open data, which Mortimer Spinks kind of released. So we also asked them which sectors did they want to work in, which ones added value to their CV and value to their experience. Top-notch, large, complex corporates. Public sector didn't seem to be one of those. Public sector was down at 15%, large, complex corporates was 48.3%. A few people have referred to our organisations as corporates, but probably not. But you know, but they wanted to work in those large, complex corporates. FinTech, 37.6%. You know, I'm not sure. I think Computer Weekly's readership is probably fairly representative. You know, it's large enough. 2,000 people. It's pretty large. It was interesting to us. Software consultancy, 36.5. I worked in software consultancy for 10 years. I don't recommend it. You know, the startups, etc. All these things. So it's all these things coming in front of the public sector. That's what they thought added value to their CV, to their experience. You know, despite all that stuff I've said about what we're doing. So we're curious again, we're asking ourselves, why is this? You know, we couldn't put that down in the survey. The Women in Technology survey might have got a bit upset. They would have had even fewer female speakers today. Sorry, Socitm. But you know, so we didn't want to put so much in there, so we did just anecdotal stuff, asking around. Oh, sorry, one bit I missed. We need digital people across the country. The other thing we're conscious, we asked questions about Central. We didn't want to get down into geography in that survey. But again, this is local. We need digital people everywhere across the country. I think Martin, I'm not sure where Martin is, asked a question earlier about doing digital the right place in places. You know, if you're going to do user research, like some of these modern digital things, you need to be doing user research with your own users, not somebody else's. You need to be working locally with your own third sector providers who are giving you social care if you're going to integrate it in. There's probably quite a few local third sector things. So you need digital people across the country to deliver all this world-leading stuff that we can do and improve people's lives. I'd love to be able to do it. So we asked why. So we did some anecdotal stuff and we're asking around. Some of it will be broken windows and those bits and pieces. But it kept coming back to this image thing. We kept saying there's rhetoric. Obviously we're in Purda, so I've taken off the names of the politician I'm quoting just here. It's a famous speech. In the speech, this politician said the answer, we need to get rid of the public sector procurement managers who think the answer to everything is a big contract with a big business and who shuts out millions of Britain's small and medium-sized companies for massive potential market. A lot of us in tech and digital, we look at those words and we say, okay, I kind of agree with that. We've made some mistakes there, I kind of agree with that. But there's another paragraph in that speech which says, I can announce today that we are taking on the enemies of enterprise. The press latched onto that. So they latched onto those buzzwords, the enemies of enterprise. So we may be hearing one word, but other people are hearing another, and it's putting them off what we're going. I don't think, looking around the room, does anyone want to put their hand up as an enemy of enterprise? No, okay. Just check in, somebody may want to volunteer. Often we did those things, in the public sector. I worked in the private sector for 20 years. Those things happened in the private sector just as in the public sector. Calling it enemies of enterprise, it's rhetoric. It puts people off the public sector as opposed to work. His image, this is obviously Sir Humphrey from Yes Minister, for those who love their 80s sitcoms. So, is that you? Is that the people in your department? It's not. Looking around the room, I'm not seeing many Sir Humphreys. Again, I'm not going to ask for hands up. And this all has an impact. This is some reports again last year from The Guardian, from Deloitte. It becomes harder and harder to attract and recruit and train people. So we need to celebrate the public sector. It's a great place to work, a place to do fantastic things and improve lives. We need to celebrate it. It shouldn't be naive, but it needs to be open. Encourage everyone to take part. Private sector, third sector, citizens as well. Got to be open to all of that feedback, all of that input from all of those different groups we work with. We need to make sure we beat faster at the mention of digital, not be scared by it. A lot of people are scared of digital. They think it threatens their jobs rather than improving their jobs, improving their lives, improving their work conditions. We need to get that hearts beating faster. We're all part of the journey. And we need a public sector alliance where we all march together. That's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. We've got time just quickly if anybody has a question for either Rob or Peter that they would particularly like to put. Both of them will be around later, I'm sure, as well, if you want to have a chat about any of the issues they've raised. No? Oh, sorry, one right at the back behind you, John.
Hi, I'm John Fox. I'm a reviewer for Better Connected. My challenge is how do you connect the organisation together? I mean, if we can answer this question, we can solve digital, but the communications, the customer services people all get digital. The IT people, generally speaking, get digital. It's the chief executive and the senior management. They agree the policies. They kind of go for the projects and so forth, but they don't necessarily engage. They don't necessarily get it. What's the panacea that can fix senior management to fully embrace the digital agenda?
Quick answer from each of you.
What a great question. And as you say, it's a panacea, isn't it? And if we had the answers to all of those things, I don't think we'd be sat here today. I guess there are some things that we can do. We need to... I guess the emergence of any new technology in its widest sense takes a while to bed in, doesn't it? And so we need to learn from the lessons in the past. The likelihood is that there'll be some at the front who will drive the use of these sort of innovations, and therefore those local authorities are going to get it, and that will drag by either encouragement or embarrassment the other local authorities to do the same. Democracy is a great way of rooting out good and less effective, so that's another a real practical driver that local authorities have as well. And I guess the stuff that hopefully Peter and I have alluded to today are the other key bits for that.
Great answer. And I just add to that, doing digital. So it's a thing of actually getting the leaders to realise it's not complex, it's not locked away in a room. Actually just do it, roll your sleeves up. We can all do user research, we can all pull together some applications on the front end maybe. Roll your sleeves up, try it out, it's easy.
Straight to the point. Gentlemen, thank you. That's the end of this session. If you just show again your appreciation for Rob Kenyon and Peter Wells.